on the Russian-Syrian Kurdish connection.
Yeah.
There was a call by Russia today that there ought to be more cooperation between the Syrian regime and Kurdish forces in Syria, and in fact suggesting that they will be working with them. Those are the same forces that you, in fact, supported at one time or another. So do you find that this is good, bad, or is it, does it happen at the expense of other groups and so on? You know, how do you interpret this?
You're saying that the Assad regime or the Russians have said?
The Russians are urging more cooperation between Kurdish militias.
I mean,
and
to that Said, I would simply...
That's exactly what you did, let's say, months back.
Sure. Said, to that I would say, you know, first of all, we just categorically reject the premise that that the Assad regime is legitimately going after ISIL or exclusively going after ISIL. You know, they've clearly have the moderate Syrian opposition in their targets, and those groups that are fighting in what has become a civil war between Assad's regime and this Syrian opposition. So, you know, for them to say they need to join forces is a bit disingenuous. The Kurds that you're talking about have actually been among the groups that we've been supporting through close airstrikes and other forms of support, who are actually been taking the fight to ISIS.
Just a quick follow-up. Yesterday, the president said that, you know, we will bring in parts of the opposition with whom, frankly, we don't share much and so on, because they do represent Syrians. Now, certainly the regime represents Syrians as well. So why would you work with groups that you don't share, that you have no commonality with, but you will not work with the Syrian regime that basically represents Christians, minorities, other groups, you know, a great many Sunnis and so on? He does represent them, or they say, at least for now, that he represents them.
I'm sorry, just to get to the crux of your question.
The crux of my question, that the president yesterday in his press conference said that we will bring in, you know, for the transition, we will bring in elements of the opposition that, frankly, with whom we don't share a great deal with. On the other hand, okay, you say you will not work with Assad. You can't see him as being part of Syria in the future, when in fact he does represent, you know, a portion of the Syrian population.
Right. So, fair point. And I talked a little bit about this yesterday. So there's a Saudi-led effort coming out of the Vienna meetings to identify legitimate, broad, representative group of the Syrian opposition, Syrian political opposition, armed groups and civil society. So that process is going to take place in the coming weeks. I don't have an exact date, but that's all part of this. Again, if there's two elements or two tracks here, one is obviously anti-ISIL and defeating ISIL. The other track that began months ago, but has really gained traction in Vienna, is this political process. Two elements to that. One is identifying those members of the Syrian opposition representative body who can then represent the Syrian people in this political transition. And part of that is, we've acknowledged this is going to have to, it's certainly going to have to include members of the Syrian government. You know our position on Assad. We've agreed to disagree on Assad's future in order to move this process forward.
Mark, can we come back? Mark, can we